in the darkness, not in hell, not in heaven, but in the place that existed before either had names. Before judgment, before resurrection, before the first grave was ever dug, humanity recorded its first descent into death itself. And what they wrote was not a prayer, not a consolation, not a promise. It was a warning. In the dust-choked temples of ancient Sumer, where the Tigris and Euphrates carved civilization from wilderness, the priests guarded a story so dangerous, so forbidden, that they buried it in symbols even their own people could barely decipher. A story about a goddess, a queen who chose to die, not by accident, not by fate, but walking willingly through 7 gates that would strip her of everything she was, her power, her identity, her very self, until nothing remained but flesh, naked, vulnerable, mortal. This is the story of Inanna, the queen of heaven and earth, the bringer of love and war, fertility and devastation, life in one hand and death in the other. This is the story of her descent, not metaphorical, not symbolic, but literal, written in clay 4,000 years ago by hands that still trembled at what they were preserving. The oldest underworld journey in human history, the blueprint for every resurrection myth that would follow, the original, the first, the one all others echo. And if you've ever wondered why death terrifies us, why we dream of return, why every civilization tells the same story of descent and rising, it's because long before Egypt built its pyramids, long before prophets spoke of resurrection, long before any heaven promised eternal life, the Sumerians knew something. They knew the secret, and they wrote it down. Picture this: the great city of Uruk, jewel of ancient Mesopotamia, where ziggurats pierce the sky like fingers reaching for the gods themselves. The year is roughly 3000 BCE, or earlier, lost in the mists when history and myth were still one. Here, Inanna reigns. Inanna the magnificent, Inanna, fierce-eyed queen of heaven, Inanna who commands the very forces of desire and destruction. She is not gentle, she is not meek, she is the storm that brings rain to parched fields and the flood that drowns armies. She is worshipped, feared, absolute. But beneath the earth, far below the temples and palaces, beyond the reach of sunlight, deeper than any living thing should go, there exists another realm. The Sumerians called it Kur, the Akkadians knew it as Irkalla, the great below, the land of no return, the dust-choked maw where all things end. Not hell, because hell implies punishment, judgment, divine justice. No, this place is older than justice, older than morality. It simply is, inevitable, absolute. The place where gods and mortals alike become nothing but shadows and ash. And ruling this eternal night, sitting upon a throne carved from the bones of the cosmos itself, is Ereshkigal, the dark sister, queen of the dead, Inanna's sister. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Here's where the ancient tablets begin to whisper secrets that make your skin crawl. Because Inanna, goddess of love, goddess of war, goddess who needs nothing and fears nothing, makes a choice. She decides to descend, to visit her sister in the underworld, to pass through the 7 gates, to enter the realm from which no one returns. Why? Why would a goddess choose death? The tablets give us reasons: a funeral to attend, a sister to visit, power to seize. But the priests who chanted these words around temple fires knew better. They knew this wasn't about politics. This wasn't about family disputes. This was about something far older, far more terrifying. This was about initiation. You see, what the Sumerians understood, what they encoded in this myth, was that true power doesn't come from holding on to who you are. It comes from being willing to let everything go, to die completely, to be unmade, stripped, broken down to nothing, so that you can be reborn as something more. But here's the thing they also knew. Not everyone who attempts this returns. Not every descent ends in resurrection. Some deaths are permanent. Some deaths are final. And the underworld doesn't care about your divinity. It doesn't care about your crown, your power, your name. The law of the great below is absolute. None who enter may return unchanged. None who pass the 7 gates may keep what they carry. None who face the Queen of Death may leave without payment. So Inanna prepares herself. She adorns her body with the 7 May, the divine powers of civilization itself. The Shugura, her crown of the steppe, authority over all lands. The lapis lazuli beads around her neck, the weight of heaven. The twin egg-shaped beads upon her breast, fertility, creation, life itself. The breastplate called Come Man Come, desire, seduction, irresistible power. The gold ring on her wrist, sovereignty. The lapis measuring rod and line, justice, order, cosmic balance. And wrapped around her body, the royal robe, her very identity as queen. She is magnificent. She is terrifying. She is a goddess in full regalia, draped in the powers that make heaven and earth bow. But she knows that where she's going, none of this will matter. If you're still watching, you're already caught in the same spell that held ancient audiences transfixed for 4,000 years. Hit subscribe right now, because what happens next is the reason every resurrection story you've ever heard exists. The 7 gates are opening. You need to see what's beyond them. Inanna stands before the first gate of the underworld, the gate called Ganzir, the Great Gate. It towers above her, carved from stone older than memory, inscribed with warnings in a language that predates language itself. The gatekeeper stands watch. Neti, the chief gatekeeper of the underworld, whose name means the one who seizes. He does not bow. He does not step aside. Who are you, Neti demands, who dares approach the land of no return? And Inanna answers with the voice that has commanded armies and inspired poets. I am Inanna, Queen of Heaven. I go to the east to witness funeral rites. My sister, Ereshkigal's husband, Gugalana, the bull of heaven, has died. I come to pay respects. A lie? A truth? The tablets don't tell us. What they do tell us is that Neti leaves her standing there, standing before that massive gate, while he descends to tell her queen. Deep below, in chambers where light has never penetrated, where the air is thick with the breath of the dead, Ereshkigal sits in darkness. And when Neti brings news that her sister, brilliant, beautiful, beloved Inanna has come to visit, she does not smile. She does not weep. She rages. The tablets record her fury in words that still burn. What brings her here? What does she want? The same that she has always wanted? More? Because Ereshkigal knows her sister. Inanna, who holds heaven and earth. Inanna, who takes what she desires. Inanna, who has everything, while Ereshkigal rules only dust and shadow. This isn't just cosmic drama. This is family. This is resentment older than civilization. This is the sister who stayed below while the other ascended to glory. The forgotten one, the dark one, the one no hymns are sung to. And Ereshkigal gives her command. Bolt the 7 gates of the underworld.
Then at each gate let one of Inanna's divine garments be removed. She will enter according to the ancient rites. She will learn that no one comes before the Queen of the Great Below dressed in glory. The ancient rites, the stripping, the ritual that transforms gods into meat. Gate by gate Inanna descends, and at each gate something is taken. First gate, the Shugura, her crown is removed. What is this? Inanna demands. Be silent, Inanna. The ways of the underworld are perfect. They may not be questioned. Authority vanishes. The queen becomes a visitor. Second gate, the lapis beads from her neck. Heaven's weight lifted. The goddess becomes earthbound. Third gate, the twin egg-shaped beads from her breast. Creation itself stripped away. Fertility becomes barren stone. Fourth gate, the breastplate. Desire removed. Seduction meaningless. Fifth gate, the gold ring. Sovereignty dissolves. She rules nothing now. Sixth gate, the measuring rod and line. Justice, order, balance, all abandoned. In the underworld, there is no fairness, only inevitability. Seventh gate, the royal robe, her very identity, removed. She stands naked before her sister's throne. Inanna, once Queen of Heaven, now stripped of every power, every symbol, every shred of divinity that made her who she was. Just flesh, just bone, just a vulnerable, mortal thing. The 7 judges of the underworld, the Anunnaki, rise from their seats. They fix their eyes upon her, the eye of death. They speak the word of guilt, the word that has no appeal, the word that ends all argument. And Ereshkigal, dark sister, furious queen, goddess of eternal ending, looks upon Inanna with eyes that have watched empires crumble to dust. She does not gloat, she does not mock, she simply raises her hand. And Inanna dies. Not symbolically, not metaphorically. The tablets are clear. Her corpse is hung on a hook, like meat in a butcher's stall, like a warning to anyone who dares think they can cheat the great below. For 3 days, 3 nights, the Queen of Heaven hangs in the darkness, dead, utterly, completely dead. And above, in the world of the living, the earth begins to die. No crops grow, no rain falls, no woman conceives, no animal mates. The world becomes as barren as the land below, because Inanna, goddess of fertility, of growth, of life itself, is gone, and her absence is a wound in the fabric of existence.
No crops grow, no rain falls, no woman conceives, no animal mates. The world becomes as barren as the land below, because Inanna, goddess of fertility, of growth, of life itself, is gone, and her absence is a wound in the fabric of existence. Her faithful servant, Ninshubur, waits above. 3 days pass. Inanna does not return. Ninshubur knows what this means. She runs to the great gods for help. First to Enlil, the king of gods. He refuses. She sought the great below, let her stay there. Then to Nanna, the moon god, Inanna's father. He refuses. She descended of her own will. The underworld's ways are not to be questioned. Finally, she comes to Enki. Enki, the wise one, god of water, of craft, of secret knowledge. Enki, who understands that the cosmos operates on balance, but balance can be negotiated. Enki alone grieves for Inanna. Enki alone sees what her death means, and Enki, clever, dangerous, brilliant Enki, devises a plan that will break every rule of the underworld, not through force, not through power, but through the one thing the land of death has never experienced:
empathy. You're watching the moment that changed how humanity understood death forever. Drop a comment right now telling me if you've ever heard of Inanna before this video, because what I'm about to reveal next is the resurrection protocol that inspired every myth of return you know. The Christ story, Persephone, Osiris, all of them echo what happens next. Enki reaches beneath his fingernails. From the dirt there, the sacred dirt, the primordial clay, he fashions two beings, not gods, not human, something in between, the Kurgara and the Galatur. Genderless, neither living nor dead, creatures of threshold and liminality, mourners, empaths, shapeshifters of sorrow. They exist between categories, and thus the underworld's laws cannot hold them. Enki gives them the food of life, the water of life, but he also gives them something more powerful, instructions. When you enter the throne room, Enki tells them, Ereshkigal will be in mourning. She will cry out in pain. When she cries, "Oh, my heart," you must cry, "Oh, your heart." When she cries, "Oh, my liver," you must cry, "Oh, your liver." Mirror her grief, echo her pain, give her what no one in the underworld has ever given her. Acknowledgement, witness, recognition of suffering. Because here's the secret the ancient priests encoded. Ereshkigal isn't evil. She's not a demon. She's not punishing the dead out of cruelty. She's trapped, forced to rule a realm of endless sorrow, holding dominion over loss itself, while her sister dances in heaven's light. She is the forgotten one, the one no one chooses, the necessary darkness that everyone fears. And when someone, anyone, finally sees her pain, finally witnesses her loneliness, finally acknowledges that even the Queen of Death suffers, something breaks. The Kurgara and Galatur descend. They pass through the 7 gates, but because they are neither living nor dead, the gates cannot strip them of anything. They have nothing to lose. They are nothing, and that makes them perfect. They enter the throne room. Ereshkigal sits in darkness, consumed by grief that has no name, and when she cries out her pain, the pain of eternal isolation, of being the necessary evil, of holding death while her sister holds life, these strange creatures echo her. They see her, they witness her, they give her the one thing the underworld has never known: compassion. Moved by this impossible gift, Ereshkigal offers them anything they desire, anything in her kingdom. They ask only for the corpse on the hook, the body of Inanna. Ereshkigal agrees. How could she not? Someone finally saw her as more than death itself. They sprinkle Inanna's corpse with the food of life, the water of life, and the dead goddess breathes. But the underworld's law cannot be broken, only bent. As Inanna ascends to leave, the judges of the underworld speak. No one ascends from the underworld unmarked. If Inanna wishes to return to the great above, she must provide a substitute. Someone must take her place. The price. Always there is a price. Death cannot be cheated, only transferred. Inanna has conquered death. She has descended to the great below and returned. She has done what no god before her ever attempted. But now she must choose. Who will die in her place? Who pays the price of resurrection? The Sumerians knew something we've forgotten. They knew that death is not the opposite of life. Death is the price of life, and every return demands a sacrifice. Every rebirth requires a substitute. Every rebirth kills something else. So, here's what I need you to ask yourself. What if this myth, this ancient forbidden knowledge carved into clay tablets 4,000 years ago, wasn't just a story? What if it was a warning? What if the oldest truth humanity ever wrote was this? To be reborn, something in you must die. But to return to the living world, someone else must take your place in the darkness. Like this video right now if you want to see who Inanna chooses, because the answer and what it reveals about love, sacrifice, and the cycles that govern all existence will reshape how you see every myth that came after. The price of immortality is about to be revealed. The demons are waiting. The debt must be paid, and Inanna, transformed, resurrected, divine once more, must point her finger at someone she loves and send them into eternal darkness. This is where the myth becomes unbearable. This is where ancient audiences wept. This is where you realize that the Sumerians understood something about sacrifice that we've spent 4,000 years trying to forget. The descent was only the beginning. The real horror is the return.
Inanna walks through the world of the living, reborn, resurrected, changed. But the Gala demons walk with her. 7 of them, shadows given teeth. They cannot be bargained with. They cannot be deceived. They will not leave until flesh replaces flesh in the darkness below. Understand what's happening here. This isn't just mythology. This is the ancient world's understanding of cosmic balance. The Sumerians didn't believe in free miracles. Every gift demanded payment. Every healing required sacrifice. Every life saved meant another life spent. The universe itself was a ledger, and the books always balanced, always. Inanna arrives first at the temple of her faithful servant, Nippur, the one who ran to the gods when Inanna did not return, the one who mourned, the one who saved her. Nippur is dressed in sackcloth, her face smeared with dust, still grieving her queen, still performing the rituals of loss. "This one," the Gala hiss. "This one, take this one." They circle Nippur like vultures, ready to drag her down, ready to hang her on that hook. But Inanna raises her hand. "No!" Her voice carries the weight of divine authority restored. "Not this one. She is my minister of fair words. She spoke for me when I could not speak. She mourned when I was lost. She saved me when I hung dead in the darkness." Loyalty is rewarded. The demons move on. They come to the house of Shara, Inanna's son. He too is clothed in mourning, his face to the ground, wailing for her mother who descended and did not return. "This one," the demons whisper, but again Inanna refuses. "Not this one. He honored me in death. He remembered me in darkness." The pattern becomes clear. Every person who mourned her is spared. Every person who honored her absence is protected. Because in the ancient world, grief was sacred. Mourning was duty. To remember the dead was to keep them alive in the only way that mattered. But then they arrive at the palace of Dumuzi, Inanna's beloved, her husband, the shepherd god. And what they find there will change everything. Dumuzi is not in mourning. He sits upon his throne, dressed in magnificent robes. Musicians play, servants attend. He is radiant, laughing, alive in every way that Inanna was dead. Let that image burn. While she hung naked on a hook in the underworld, while her corpse rotted for 3 days and 3 nights, while the earth itself withered from her absence, her beloved sat on his throne and forgot her. The tablets record what happens next with words that still sear. Inanna fixes upon Dumuzi the eye of death, the same eye that killed her, the same curse that hung her on that hook. She speaks the word of guilt, the word of judgment, the word that cannot be appealed. Him, one word, one syllable, one eternal damnation. Take him.
The chase begins. Dumuzi runs. The shepherd god, suddenly mortal in his terror, flees from the Gala demons. They pursue with the patience of inevitability. They don't need to hurry. There is nowhere he can hide that death cannot find. He cries out to Utu, the sun god, his brother-in-law. Turn my hands into gazelle hands. Turn my feet into gazelle feet. Let me escape the demons. And Utu, god of justice, of light, of truth, takes pity. He transforms Dumuzi. The god becomes animal, prey, running. But you cannot outrun what you owe. The Gala find him. 3 times he escapes. 3 times he transforms. 3 times he thinks he is free. But the 4th time, they catch him in his sister's house. Inanna, goddess of vines, of wine, of things that grow, hides her brother. But the demons tear through walls, shatter doors. They drag Dumuzi out, and here the tablets become almost unbearable. They break his body. They shatter the churn. They tip over the milk pail. They destroy everything that represents his pastoral life, his identity, his purpose. They strip him exactly as Inanna was stripped, gate by gate, layer by layer, until nothing remains but flesh about to become meat. And they drag him down, down through the earth, down past the roots of mountains, down beyond the reach of sun and star, down to the 7 gates. At each gate, something is taken, his strength, his beauty, his divinity, his hope, until he stands where Inanna stood, naked before Ereshkigal's throne, vulnerable, doomed.
And just as Inanna hung for 3 days and 3 nights, Dumuzi is impaled upon that same hook, his corpse displayed, a warning, a payment, a substitute. The debt is paid. Balance is restored. The cosmic ledger is satisfied. But something unexpected. Inanna arrives in the underworld, the sister who tried to hide him, the sister who loved him. She comes before Ereshkigal and makes an offer that will reshape the myth. Let me take his place for half the year. Let my brother return to the world above for 6 months. I will stay below. Then we will trade. He will descend, and I will rise, forever, back and forth, season after season. Ereshkigal considers this, and perhaps she remembers the Kurgara and Galatur. Perhaps she remembers what it felt like to be seen, to be acknowledged. Perhaps even the Queen of Death understands love when she sees it. She agrees. And so it is decreed. Dumuzi will spend 6 months in the underworld, 6 months above. His sister will mirror his journey. When he descends, she rises. When she descends, he rises. Forever, eternal, an oscillation between life and death. And here's where myth becomes calendar, where story becomes survival, where ancient religion reveals itself as humanity's first attempt to understand why the world dies and is reborn. You see, in ancient Mesopotamia, there were 2 seasons, the growing season and the dead season. 6 months when the earth blooms, 6 months when everything withers. And the Sumerians needed an explanation. They needed to understand why the world that feeds them dies half the year, why the rain stops, why the grain refuses to grow, why death is cyclical, inevitable, but also, crucially, temporary. It's because a god is in the underworld. Dumuzi, the shepherd, the vegetation god, descends, and while he's gone, the earth mourns, just as it mourned when Inanna descended.
But he returns every spring, every rebirth, every resurrection, because his sister loves him enough to trade places, because sacrifice makes renewal possible, because death is never permanent when love demands exchange. Let me take you deeper. Let me show you the universe the Sumerians lived in, because to understand why this myth mattered, why it was carved into clay and chanted in temples and whispered by priests who understood its power, you need to see the cosmic architecture that made it necessary. Picture a universe in 3 tiers. On, heaven, the realm of sky, of stars, of divine law, ruled by the god An, whose name literally means sky. This is where cosmic order resides, where the May, the divine powers and laws are kept, unchanging, eternal, perfect. Ki, earth, the middle realm, where humans struggle and gods meddle, where life happens, where stories unfold, the place of becoming, not being. Kur, the underworld, the great below, the realm of dissolution, where all things return to dust, not evil, not punishment, just ending, the place where forms dissolve back into formlessness. And between these realms, movement was forbidden. The cosmic law: heaven stays above, earth stays in the middle, the underworld stays below. You don't cross boundaries, you don't violate categories, you don't move between realms unless you're willing to pay the price.
But Inanna crossed. She violated the cosmic order. She went from heaven to the underworld and back again. She did what no god had ever attempted, and the universe itself demanded payment for that violation. Let me introduce you to the divine players more fully, because this isn't just a story about one goddess. This is about power, family, cosmic balance, and the hidden resentments of eternity. An, the sky god, father of gods, remote, abstract. He doesn't intervene because he represents cosmic law itself. Law doesn't bend, it doesn't negotiate, it simply is. Enlil, the king of the gods, lord of wind and storm. When Ninshubur begs him to save Inanna, he refuses, not out of cruelty, but because he understands something crucial. She sought the great below of her own free will. She craved the divine powers of the underworld. The ways of the underworld are perfect. They may not be questioned. Free will has consequences. Choice demands responsibility. Enlil will not violate cosmic law to save someone from their own decisions. Nanna, the grieving father. Nanna, the moon god, Inanna's father. He also refuses to help, but you can hear the pain in the tablets. My daughter has gone to the underworld. What can I do? A father's helplessness. Even gods cannot always save their children. But Enki is different. God of fresh water, god of wisdom, god of craft and cunning. Enki operates in the spaces between laws. He doesn't break rules, he finds loopholes. When Ninshubur comes to him, Enki grieves, actually grieves. The tablets say his heart aches, his liver is distressed. In Sumerian physiology, the liver was the seat of emotion. This matters. Enki feels what Enlil and Nanna refuse to feel, and feeling moves him to action. Remember the creatures he creates from beneath his fingernails, the Kurgara and Galatur. Let's talk about what they really are. These beings are explicitly described as neither male nor female. They exist outside gender, outside category, outside the binary divisions that structure the cosmos. And this is key. The underworld's tower comes from its ability to strip away identity, to remove category, to dissolve boundaries.
But the Kurgara and Galatur have no boundaries to dissolve. They are already liminal, already threshold creatures, already undefined. So when they descend, the underworld cannot strip them, cannot categorize them, cannot kill what was never fully alive, cannot take from those who have nothing. They slip through the cosmic order like water through fingers. But here's the true genius of Enki's plan, the true subversion. He doesn't send warriors, he doesn't send power, he sends empathy. Because Ereshkigal, Queen of the Dead, ruler of endings, holder of the ultimate power, has never received empathy, ever. Think about it. She didn't choose her role. The tablets are clear. She was given to the underworld in marriage to Gugalana, the bull of heaven. Given, like property, like a sacrifice. While Inanna got heaven and earth, while Inanna got worship and love and hymns and glory, Ereshkigal got darkness, isolation, the thankless task of ruling death itself.
No one chooses her. No one wants her. No one celebrates her. She is necessary but hated, inevitable but feared. She is the goddess of what everyone wants to forget. And when Gugalana dies, when her husband is killed, no one mourns with her. No one acknowledges her loss, because who grieves for the Queen of Death? Who offers comfort to the one who embodies ending? She sits alone in her throne room, in perpetual darkness, holding all the pain of the dead, containing all the grief of every ending, and no one sees her. Until the Kurgara and Galatur arrive. They don't fight her. They don't bargain. They don't try to trick her. They simply witness her. When she cries out, "Oh, oh, my inside," they cry, "You're inside." When she wails, "Oh, oh, my outside," they wail, "You're outside." They mirror her, reflect her, see her, and something in the Queen of Death breaks. Not her power, not her authority, but her loneliness. For the first time in eternity, someone acknowledges her pain. For the first time, she is not just death, she is also a person who suffers. And moved by this impossible gift, this recognition, she offers her anything. They ask for the corpse. She gives it. This is shamanic wisdom encoded in myth. This is ancient psychological insight. This is the recognition that the hardest hearts, even death itself, can be softened not by force, but by being seen. The Kurgara and Galatur take Inanna's corpse from the hook. 3 days dead, flesh cold, lifeless, emptied. They sprinkle it with the food of life, not bread, but something older, primordial substance, the essence of becoming. They sprinkle it with the water of life, not water, but vitality itself, liquid existence, the first ocean from which all things emerged. 60 times they do this, 60 times, because resurrection is not instant, death is not easily reversed. The body must remember how to be a body. The spirit must remember how to inhabit flesh. And then she breathes. Inanna, dead for 3 days, corpse on a hook, breathes. Her eyes open, not to heaven, but to the darkness of Kur. She sees the throne of her sister. She sees the 7 judges. She sees the realm she thought she'd never leave. And she rises. Back through the 7 gates she climbs, but this time everything is returned to her. At the first gate, her royal robe, identity restored. At the second gate, the measuring rod and line, justice reclaimed. At the third gate, the gold ring, sovereignty regained. At the fourth gate, the breastplate, power reawakened. At the fifth gate, the twin egg-shaped beads, fertility renewed. At the sixth gate, the lapis beads, heaven's weight resumed. At the seventh gate, the shugura, her crown,
authority absolute. She is remade, but she is not unchanged. Because you don't visit death and return the same. You don't hang on a hook for 3 days and nights and emerge unaltered. You don't face absolute dissolution and resurrection without transformation. Inanna has seen what lies beyond. She knows the taste of ending. She understands that power can be stripped, that identity can dissolve, that even gods are meat in the darkness.
But she also knows something else, something the living world could never teach. She knows that death is not the end, that dissolution can be followed by reconstitution, that there is a way back, at a price, always at a price, but there is a way. And as she emerges into the light of the world above, the Gala Delans emerge with her, 7 of them, shadows with teeth, Death's collectors. Someone must descend in your place, they hiss. The law cannot be broken. The balance must be maintained. Choose. And so we return to where we were, to loyal Ninshubur, who mourned and was spared, to Shara, who grieved and was protected, to Dumuzi, who forgot and was damned. But let me tell you what the tablets don't say. Let me tell you what the priests whispered but never wrote. The choice Inanna makes is not just about Dumuzi's betrayal, it's about the nature of resurrection itself. You cannot be reborn without killing your old self. You cannot transform without destroying what you were. And sometimes the thing that must die is the person you loved when you were a different person. Dumuzi represents Inanna's old life, her pastoral existence, her role as bride and beloved, her identity as one who is desired. But Inanna has been to the underworld. She has been stripped and killed and resurrected. She is not the goddess who descended. She is something new, something other, something that has eaten death and survived. And that new self cannot love the same way the old self did, cannot want the same things, cannot be the same person. So when she condemns Dumuzi, she's not just punishing him for forgetting her, she's killing the part of herself that he represents, the innocent, the beloved, the one who needed a husband. She is choosing transformation over comfort, evolution over safety, her new self over her old identity. This is why the myth is terrifying. This is why it was considered forbidden knowledge, because it tells us that to truly change, you must be willing to sacrifice everything, even, especially, the things you love most. And when Inanna offers to share her brother's fate, when she creates the cycle of descent and return, that's not just about agricultural seasons, that's about the ongoing nature of transformation. You don't change once and stay changed. You cycle, you descend and return, you die and are reborn, over and over, season after season. The Sumerians understood that growth is cyclical, that you must repeatedly let go of who you were to become who you're becoming, that resurrection is not a single event, it's a pattern, a rhythm, an eternal return. And this is where the myth reveals its deepest secret. This story wasn't just religious, it was initiatory. In cultures across the ancient world, shamans underwent ritual death. They were symbolically torn apart, stripped of identity, reduced to nothing. And then, if they survived, they were reborn, with new powers, new knowledge, new names. The descent of Inanna is the mythic template for this practice. The 7 gates are the stages of ego death. The stripping is the dissolution of self. The hook is the moment of absolute annihilation. The resurrection is the rebirth into power. Siberian shamans spoke of being dismembered by spirits and reassembled with crystals in their bones. Australian Aboriginal initiates were ritually killed and revived with sacred stones in their bodies. Native American vision quests demanded days of isolation, fasting, confrontation with death.
All of them echo Inanna's descent. All of them require dying to be reborn. All of them demand the sacrifice of the old self. And once you see this pattern, you see it everywhere. Persephone, dragged to the underworld, returns transformed, creates the seasons. Osiris, murdered, dismembered, resurrected, rules the dead. Orpheus descends for Eurydice, loses everything, gains immortal song. Christ, 3 days dead, harrowing hell, resurrected. Odin, hanging on Yggdrasil for 9 nights, pierced by his own spear, gains the runes. The Tibetan Book of the Dead guides the soul through bardos, stages of dissolution. Every single one, every resurrection myth, every underworld journey, every narrative of death and return, they all echo Inanna, because Inanna was first. 4,000 years ago, maybe older, the story existed in oral tradition long before clay tablets, chanted by priests who understood its power, performed in temples as ritual drama, whispered to initiates who were about to undergo their own symbolic death. This is the original, the source, the template from which all others derive, and the Sumerians knew it was dangerous. They knew this knowledge could destroy you if you weren't ready. So they encoded it in myth, wrapped it in metaphor, gave it to a goddess so humans could witness without attempting.
But some tried anyway. Throughout history, mystics and initiates have used this myth as a map, a guide to their own transformation, a blueprint for ego death and rebirth. They descended into their own underworlds, stripped themselves of identity, hung upon their own hooks, faced their own Ereshkigals. Some returned, some didn't. Because the underworld is real, not as a place, but as a state. The state of complete dissolution, of absolute vulnerability, of being reduced to nothing so you can become anything. And the question that has echoed for 4 millennia, what are you willing to sacrifice to be transformed? What part of yourself must die so a new self can be born? Who will you send to the underworld in your place? The myth doesn't give easy answers. It gives brutal truth. Subscribe right now if you want to see how this ancient knowledge connects to modern psychology, mysticism, and the resurrection myths that shaped world religions. Because in Act 3, we're going to reveal why every culture that came after Sumer told the same story, and what it means that we're still telling it today. Picture Dumuzi in the underworld now, hanging where Inanna hung, experiencing what she experienced, understanding too late the cost of forgetting. Picture Geshtinanna descending to take his place for 6 months, a sister's love, creating a rhythm that will govern all life. Picture Inanna transformed, ruling with knowledge of both realms, no longer just Queen of Heaven, now also the goddess who conquered death. She is the only deity in Sumerian mythology who has been to the underworld and returned, the only one who knows both life and death from the inside, the only one who has been stripped completely and reconstituted. She is initiation incarnate, transformation made divine, the pattern of all change. And the Sumerians worshipped her not despite her descent, but because of it, not in spite of her death, but because she overcame it, not in spite of the price, but because she was willing to pay it. She did what terrifies us most. She let go of everything. She became nothing. She died completely. And she came back. But the question remains, at what cost? Dumuzi hangs in darkness. Geshtinanna descends willingly. The earth cycles between life and death. The seasons turn. The pattern repeats.
forever. This is the price of resurrection. This is the cost of transformation. This is what the oldest story ever written wants you to understand. Nothing is free. Every return demands a sacrifice. Every rebirth requires a death. Every transformation costs something you love. And knowing this, truly knowing this, changes everything.
But some tried anyway. Throughout history, mystics and initiates have used this myth as a map, a guide to their own transformation, a blueprint for ego death and rebirth. They descended into their own underworlds, stripped themselves of identity, hung upon their own hooks, faced their own Ereshkigals. Some returned, some didn't. Because the underworld is real, not as a place, but as a state. The state of complete dissolution, of absolute vulnerability, of being reduced to nothing so you can become anything. And the question that echoed for 4 millennia, what are you willing to sacrifice to be transformed? What part of yourself must die so a new self can be born? Who will you send to the underworld in your place? The myth doesn't give easy answers. It gives brutal truth. Subscribe right now if you want to see how this ancient knowledge connects to modern psychology, mysticism, and the resurrection myths that shaped world religions. Because in Act 3, we're going to reveal why every culture that came after Sumer told the same story, and what it means that we're still telling it today. Picture Dumuzi in the underworld now, hanging where Inanna hung, experiencing what she experienced, understanding too late the cost of forgetting. Picture Inanna descending to take his place for 6 months, a sister's love creating a rhythm that will govern all life. Picture Inanna transformed, ruling with knowledge of both realms, no longer just Queen of Heaven, now also the goddess who conquered death. She is the only deity in Sumerian mythology who has been to the underworld and returned, the only one who knows both life and death from the inside, the only one who has been stripped completely and reconstituted. She is initiation incarnate, transformation made divine, the pattern of all change. And the Sumerians worshipped her not despite her descent, but because of it, not in spite of her death, but because she overcame it, not despite the price, but because she was willing to pay it. She did what terrifies us most. She let go of everything. She became nothing. She died completely, and she came back. But the question remains, at what cost? Dumuzi hangs in darkness. Inanna descends willingly. The earth cycles between life and death. The seasons turn. The pattern repeats forever. This is the price of resurrection. This is the cost of transformation. This is what the oldest story ever written wants you to understand. Nothing is free. Every return demands a sacrifice. Every rebirth requires a death. Every transformation costs something you love. And knowing this, truly knowing this, changes everything.
There's something the priests never said out loud. Something they only whispered in the darkness of temple archives. Something that made them shudder even as they carved it into clay. This story was never meant to comfort you. It was meant to prepare you. Because the Sumerians understood something that we've spent 4,000 years trying to forget. Something so terrifying, so fundamentally true that every civilization since has tried to soften it with promises of paradise and eternal life. They understood that transformation is violence. Not the violence of war, not the violence of conquest, but the violence of becoming. The violence of the seed that must crack open in darkness. The violence of the butterfly that must destroy the caterpillar from within. The violence of the self that must die so a new self can breathe. Inanna's descent wasn't a metaphor for hard times. It wasn't a poetic way to talk about depression. It wasn't a nice story about overcoming obstacles. It was a manual for ego death, a map of psychological annihilation, a blueprint for becoming unrecognizable to yourself. And here's why that matters. Here's why this 4,000-year-old myth is more relevant now than ever. Here's why you needed to hear this story today. Because we live in a world that promises transformation without cost. We're told we can reinvent ourselves with a new wardrobe, find ourselves with a vacation, transform with a 10-day course, awaken with a weekend workshop. We're sold resurrection without death, rebirth without destruction, new life without sacrifice. And it's a lie. The Sumerians knew it was a lie. That's why they wrote this story. That's why they preserved it. That's why it survived when empires fell and languages died. Because the truth doesn't change. Real transformation requires real death. Not symbolic, not metaphorical, real. The death of who you thought you were. The death of the story you've been telling yourself. The death of the identity you've built. The death of the relationships that defined you. The death of the dreams that no longer fit. The death of the person everyone expects you to be. All of it, stripped away, gate by gate, layer by layer, until you stand naked in your own underworld. The shamans understood this. That's why their initiations were brutal. In Siberia, they spoke of being torn apart by spirits, their bones scraped clean, their organs removed and counted, then reassembled, different, other, remade. In the Amazon, ayahuasqueros speak of death in ceremony, ego death, the dissolution of self, the experience of being unmade, not pleasant, not peaceful, terrifying. In Tibet, monks meditate on corpses, visualize their own decomposition, watch themselves rot so they can understand impermanence from the inside. They're all doing what Inanna did. They're all descending through 7 gates. They're all being stripped. They're all hanging on hooks. Because wisdom doesn't come from accumulation, it comes from loss. Power doesn't come from holding on, it comes from letting go. Resurrection doesn't come from avoiding death, it comes from walking through it. Now let me show you something that will change how you see every story you've ever been told. The pattern revealed. After Inanna, the pattern spreads like a virus, like a meme, like a truth too powerful to contain.
Centuries later, the Greeks tell of Persephone, maiden goddess of spring, dragged to the underworld by Hades. Her mother Demeter grieves, the earth dies, nothing grows. Sound familiar? Persephone eats 6 pomegranate seeds, 6, half the year. She must return to the underworld for 6 months. The earth dies with her departure, blooms with her return. The cycle, the pattern, Inanna's pattern, Dumuzi's rhythm, but softened, made palatable. The Greeks gave Persephone less agency, made her a victim instead of a chooser, removed the hook, added romance, because the truth was too hard. In Egypt, they told of Osiris, god-king, murdered by his brother Set, dismembered, his body parts scattered across Egypt. Isis, his wife and sister, collects the pieces, reassembles him, uses magic to resurrect him. But he cannot return to the world of the living. He rules the underworld instead, judge of the dead, lord of resurrection. Notice the pattern? Death, dismemberment, a devoted woman who saves him, partial return, a realm ruled, a balance maintained. Inanna, Ereshkigal, Enki's creatures showing empathy, Dumuzi's substitution, the cycle. It's all there. Egypt knew Sumer, traded with Sumer, learned from Sumer. They took the myth and made it their own. Fast forward, 2,000 years ago, a prophet is executed, 3 days dead, descends to the underworld, the harrowing of hell, Christ breaking down the gates of death, freeing the captives, conquering mortality. 3 days, just like Inanna, just like Dumuzi, 3 days on the hook. And then, resurrection. But this time, the substitute isn't someone else, the substitute is himself. God sacrificing God, the substitute and the resurrected as one. Christianity took Inanna's pattern and made it singular. One death, one resurrection, one sacrifice. But the structure? Identical. Descent, death, underworld journey, resurrection, cosmic balance maintained through substitution. The oldest story, the first pattern, still echoing.
In the frozen north, they sang of Odin, All-Father, seeker of wisdom. He hangs himself on Yggdrasil, the world tree, pierced by his own spear, 9 days and 9 nights. No food, no water, hanging, dying. A sacrifice of myself to myself on that tree which no man knows. And at the moment of death, he sees the runes, the secret knowledge, the cosmic alphabet. He tears them from the void, screams, falls, reborn with forbidden wisdom. Inanna's pattern again, the willing descent, the hanging, the death that brings knowledge, the return transformed. Even the Norse couldn't escape it. In Tibet, they wrote the Bardo Thodal, the guidebook for the soul after death. It describes the journey through bardos, stages of dissolution, the stripping away of consciousness, the confrontation with wrathful deities, the peaceful deities, the choice of rebirth. It's a map, just like Inanna's descent is a map. 7 gates, multiple bardos, stages of dissolution, stages of stripping. The process is identical because the process is universal. Whether you're Sumerian or Tibetan, Christian or pagan, ancient or modern, the architecture of transformation doesn't change. You must descend, you must be stripped, you must die, you must be reborn. And you must pay the price. Here's what we haven't talked about enough. Here's the part that makes this myth truly dangerous. The substitute. Dumuzi must descend because Inanna returned. Someone must hang because she walked free. The cosmic ledger must balance. And in your life, in your transformation, in your descent and return, what are you willing to sacrifice? Who pays the price of your rebirth? Maybe it's a relationship that defined you but no longer fits. Maybe it's a career you built but have outgrown. Maybe it's a version of yourself that everyone loves but you've come to hate. Maybe it's a dream you've carried for decades that's actually someone else's dream. Maybe it's the person you pretend to be to keep people comfortable. Something must be sacrificed. Someone must descend. The old self must hang on a hook so the new self can breathe. And here's what the myth doesn't sugarcoat. That sacrifice hurts. Not metaphorically, actually. It hurts to let go of who you were. It hurts to disappoint people who loved the old you. It hurts to kill dreams you've nurtured. It hurts to become unrecognizable.
It hurts to choose transformation over comfort. The Sumerians knew this. That's why the myth is brutal. That's why Inanna doesn't gently fade away. She's hung on a hook, displayed, meat. That's why Dumuzi doesn't peacefully transition. He's hunted, captured, dragged screaming into darkness. Because transformation is violent, rebirth is violent, change is violent, and any teaching that tells you otherwise is selling you something. If this is hitting you in the chest, if you feel this in your bones, smash that subscribe button and share this video with someone who needs to hear it, because what I'm about to tell you next is why this myth survived 4,000 years and why it's more dangerous than ever.
Here's why this story is forbidden. Here's why it was buried in symbolism. Here's why the priests whispered it instead of shouting it. Because if people truly understood this pattern, if they truly internalized this truth, if they truly grasped what transformation requires, they would stop consuming solutions. They would stop buying quick fixes. They would stop seeking easy answers. They would understand that the change they crave requires destruction, that the life they want demands death, that the person they're becoming must kill the person they are. And that understanding is dangerous. Dangerous to systems that profit from your dissatisfaction. Dangerous to industries built on selling transformation without sacrifice. Dangerous to authorities that need you to believe change comes from outside. Because Inanna's descent teaches something radical. The power to transform is inside you, but so is the cost. You don't need a guru. You don't need a program. You don't need permission. You need courage. Courage to descend. Courage to be stripped. Courage to die. Courage to choose who pays the price. Courage to return transformed even when no one recognizes you. That's why they buried this story. That's why it was coded in myth. That's why you weren't supposed to understand it literally. Because people who truly understand their own power to transform, people who accept the price and pay it anyway, people who are willing to descend, die, and return, those people are unstoppable. But let me bring this back to Earth, literally. The Sumerians weren't just encoding mystical wisdom, they were explaining reality. Every 6 months, Dumuzi descends. The vegetation god goes to the underworld, and the earth dies. The fields turn brown, the rivers slow, the heat becomes unbearable, nothing grows. This is the Mesopotamian summer, the dead season, the time of drought. But then, 6 months later, he returns. Inanna descends in his place. The rains come, the earth blooms, life explodes. Death, life, death, life. The pattern of existence itself. And the Sumerians understood that this pattern didn't just govern crops, it governed everything. Civilizations rise and fall. Empires bloom and wither. Ideas emerge and decay. Selves are born and die and are born again. Nothing escapes the cycle. Nothing avoids the pattern. Nothing gets resurrection without death. This is the principle of dying and rising gods, the pattern that appears in every culture, every mythology, every religion. Because it's not mythology, it's observation. The Sumerians watched the world. They saw seeds die in the earth and sprout as grain. They saw the moon wane and wax. They saw the sun set and rise. They saw women bleed and birth. They saw people sicken and heal.
They saw elders die and children born. Death and rebirth, everywhere, always, the fundamental rhythm of reality. And the Sumerians understood that this pattern didn't just govern crops, it governed everything. And they encoded it in a goddess, made it a story, gave it names and faces and drama, so we could understand, so we could remember, so we could apply it. And here's how you apply it. Here's what this 4,000-year-old myth demands of you, right now, today, in your life. Ask yourself, what gate am I standing before? What is being asked of me? What must I strip away? Is it my crown, my authority over others, my need to control? Is it my jewelry, my identity as the successful one, the smart one, the good one? Is it my robe, the very self I've constructed, the story I tell about who I am? Because you are being asked to descend. Right now, you know you are.
That feeling you have that something needs to change, that restlessness, that dissatisfaction, that sense that the life you're living isn't the life you're meant for. That's the call to descend. And you're standing at the first gate, deciding whether to enter, knowing that if you do, you cannot return unchanged, knowing that something will be taken, knowing that you will die. So the question is, are you willing? Are you willing to be stripped? Are you willing to hang on the hook? Are you willing to die completely? Are you willing to pay the price of resurrection? Because if you are, if you truly are, then you join a lineage of initiates, a lineage of shamans, a lineage of seekers who understood wisdom requires wounding, a lineage that stretches back 4,000 years, back to clay tablets in Uruk, back to priests chanting in darkness, back to Inanna herself. The ones who descended, the ones who were stripped, the ones who died, the ones who returned, changed, powerful, dangerous, alive in a way the living can never understand. This is your inheritance. This is your birthright. This is the knowledge that was preserved for you. Because here's the secret the myth has been protecting. You've already descended. Every loss you've experienced, every identity you've shed, every version of yourself that died, every relationship that ended, every dream that collapsed, every moment you didn't recognize yourself. Those were gates. You've been walking through them your whole life, being stripped, being reduced, being prepared. And every time you survived, every time you got back up, every time you remade yourself, that was resurrection. You are Inanna. You have always been Inanna. You are the one who descends. You are the one who is stripped. You are the one who dies. You are the one who resurrects. You are the pattern. You are the cycle. You are the myth made flesh. The only question is whether you do it consciously. Will you descend blindly, kicking and screaming, or will you walk to the gate willingly, knowing what it requires? Will you resist the stripping, or will you remove the garments yourself? Will you fight the hook, or will you surrender to the death that precedes all rebirth? Because it's happening anyway. Life is descending you. Time is stripping you. Age is hanging you. You can resist. You can pretend, you can cling to who you were, but the gates don't care. The underworld doesn't negotiate. The pattern doesn't stop. Or you can walk willingly. You can strip yourself. You can die before you're dead. You can become the sacrifice and the resurrector. You can be Inanna and Dumuzi.
You can descend and return, consciously, deliberately, powerfully. And when you do, when you choose the descent instead of being forced into it, when you strip yourself instead of being stripped, when you die deliberately instead of being killed, you gain something precious. Agency. The power to choose what dies, the power to select the substitute, the power to determine what you resurrect as. This is the secret of all initiation. This is the power of all ritual. This is why shamans volunteered for dismemberment, why mystics sought visions in deserts, why monks meditated on death, why seekers descended into caves. Because chosen death gives you power over unchosen death. Ritual descent prevents chaotic collapse. Voluntary transformation prevents violent destruction.
You cannot avoid the pattern, but you can dance with it. You cannot escape the cycle, but you can ride it. You cannot prevent death, but you can choose when, where, and how. This is what Inanna teaches. This is what the Sumerians preserved. This is what 4,000 years of myth has been trying to tell you. So, here we are, at the end of the oldest story, the first myth, the original descent. And you have to decide, right now, watching this. Do you hear the call? The call to descend, the call to strip away, the call to die and be reborn. Because the underworld is calling. It always is, calling you to become more than you are, calling you to shed who you were, calling you to face the darkness that makes resurrection possible. And if you're still watching, if you've made it this far, if this story has grabbed you by the throat and won't let go, then you already know the answer. You're already at the gate. You're already being called. You're already preparing to descend. So, descend. Walk to the gate willingly. Let them take your crown. Let them strip your identity. Let them remove everything you think you are. Die completely. Hang on the hook. Rot for 3 days. And then, when you're nothing, when you're empty, when you're pure potential, breathe. Let the food of life touch your lips. Let the water of life fill your veins. Let the power return, but not the same power. New power, earned power, power that comes from having died. Return through the gates. Claim your crown. Put on your robe. Take up your authority. But know that you are changed. Know that you are other. Know that you have been to the place where gods become meat. And nothing can touch you now, because you have already died and you chose to return. Subscribe to this channel right now. Share this video with everyone you know who's standing at a gate, who's being called to descend, who needs to hear that transformation is supposed to hurt. Comment below, "I am descending," and mean it, because the next video in this series reveals the forbidden mysteries they didn't even put in the tablets, the oral traditions, the priest's secrets, the hidden teachings that make this descent survivable. 4,000 years ago, in the dust and heat of ancient Sumer, priests carved a story into wet clay. A story about a goddess who chose to die, who walked through 7 gates of annihilation, who hung naked on a hook in absolute darkness, who was resurrected through empathy, who paid the price of return with someone she loved. They carved it not to entertain, not to comfort, not to inspire. They carved it to prepare humanity for the truth that never changes, that life is descent and return, that growth is death and rebirth, that wisdom is wounding and healing, that power is surrender and reclamation, that you must die to live,
that you must lose to gain, that you must descend to rise. This is the oldest truth, the first wisdom, the original teaching. And it's still true, right now, for you, in your life. So, when you stand at the gate, and you will stand at the gate, remember Inanna. Remember that queens descend. Remember that gods die. Remember that resurrection requires rot. Remember that the hook is not punishment, but process. Remember that transformation always costs something you love.
And remember this, you are not the first to descend. You are not the first to be stripped. You are not the first to hang in darkness. You are not the first to wonder if you will survive. But you are the first you to descend, and what you become when you return, what you resurrect as, what you choose to sacrifice, that's yours alone. The gate is open. The gatekeeper is waiting. The underworld is calling your name. The question was never whether you'll descend. The question was always, will you do it consciously? May you descend willingly. May you be stripped completely. May you die absolutely. May you resurrect powerfully. May you choose what you sacrifice. May you return transformed. May you recognize yourself in the darkness. May you remember yourself in the light. And may you understand finally what the Sumerians knew. That the first truth humanity ever wrote was this: to be reborn, something in you must die. But to live again, you must choose what stays dead. Inanna descended. Inanna returned. Inanna transformed. So will you.